The day the thick, cream-colored envelope from Harvard arrived, my cousin knelt on the floor in front of me, clutching her stomach as if she were in agony. She tearfully confessed that she was pregnant with my fiancé's child and begged me, with a desperation that was almost theatrical, to let them be together. A laugh bubbled up inside me, so sharp and sudden that it almost hurt. I had been wrestling with the best way to cut ties with that two-timing snake anyway, and here she was, handing me the perfect excuse on a silver platter. Why would I want to be tied down? Graduating from a world-class university, inheriting my family's successful business, and becoming a billionaire heiress in my own right sounded infinitely more appealing. A man, especially one like him, would only ever be an anchor, slowing me down and dragging me under. I knew this with absolute certainty because I had lived this life before. In my previous existence, I had died from exhaustion, my body giving out on a factory assembly line, a tragic end to a life that had started with so much promise. When I was reborn, the first thing I saw upon opening my eyes were the same pitiful, pleading ones my cousin Chloe was showing me now. This time, however, it was a month before the SATs. Chloe, a junior in college, had shown up on our doorstep with a large suitcase, using the flimsy excuse that our house was a more convenient commute to her campus. "Chloe, why didn't you let your uncle know you were coming? I would have arranged for you to be picked up," my father had said, gently pushing me aside to welcome her into our home. He immediately let her inside and, without a second thought, installed her in my bedroom. I rubbed the spot on my arm where he had jostled me, a cold feeling creeping into my chest as I watched them. What had I done last time? The memories, sharp and painful, came rushing back. I had been too proud, too territorial to simply give up my room. My refusal had sparked a massive argument with my father, a shouting match that culminated in him slapping me hard across the face. That single act of violence had been the final straw for my mother. Their already brittle marriage shattered, and the fallout was catastrophic. In the ensuing days, Chloe and my fiancé, Ethan, were inseparable, their affair unfolding right under my nose. I was so consumed with rage and a desperate need to keep Chloe from taking everything that was mine that my studies fell by the wayside. All my energy was poured into trying to force her out of my house and away from Ethan. The result was a disaster. I, a student who had never received anything less than an A, completely bombed my college entrance exams and was left with no option but to enroll in a local community college. Soon after, my parents divorced. I chose to stay with my father, a decision born of stubbornness and a refusal to admit defeat to Chloe. It was a mistake. Chloe later framed me, accusing me of pushing her down a flight of stairs, and my father, without even listening to my side of the story, threw me out of the house. With a $10 million wedding gift from my father, Chloe married Ethan, whose family was just as wealthy as ours. As for me, after I graduated from community college, I struggled to find any meaningful work. I ended up on that factory line, working myself into an early grave. This time would be different. Reborn and armed with the bitter knowledge of my past, I willingly gave up my bedroom. I quietly moved my belongings into the small, dusty attic on the third floor. It wasn't an act of surrender or fear, it was a strategic retreat. I had to seize this second chance, and that meant pouring all of my focus into the college entrance exams. My past life had taught me the most crucial lesson of all. Your own strength is the only thing you can truly rely on. The third floor was blessedly quiet, a solitary refuge where I could study without interruption. I spent every night hunched over my books, pushing myself harder than ever before. I learned to turn a blind eye to the little games Chloe and Ethan were playing downstairs, their flirtations and secret glances becoming nothing more than background noise. Finally, the exam period was over. When the results came in, my scores were so exceptional that letters from Harvard and Yale arrived within days of each other, both offering me a place. I chose Harvard. It wasn't until I was holding the official acceptance letter in my hand, feeling the weight of the embossed paper, that I felt like I could truly breathe for the first time since my rebirth. I pushed open the small attic window and took a deep, cleansing breath of the outside air. The first phase of my plan was complete. Now it was time to settle the score with Chloe, Ethan, and my father. When I came downstairs later that day, I found Chloe nestled comfortably in Ethan's arms on the living room sofa, a shy, victorious smile playing on her lips. The moment he saw me, Ethan abruptly pushed Chloe away and hurried over to me. Amelia, you're finally done hibernating. You were studying so hard you didn't have any time for me. You're going to have to make it up to me, he said, reaching for my hand with a charming smile. I took a deliberate step back, creating a clear space between us. It looks like you already found someone to keep you company, I said, my gaze flicking pointedly towards Chloe. Ethan's smooth facade faltered for a fraction of a second before he recovered, affecting an air of casual nonchalance. Amelia, what are you talking about? I'm only friendly with Chloe because she's your cousin. The bluntness of his dismissal made Chloe's face turn a sickly shade of pale. I, on the other hand, felt a flicker of grim satisfaction. My engagement to Ethan had always been a business arrangement, a strategic alliance between our two powerful families that had been decided when we were children. That was why, in my past life, I had seen him as an extension of my own future, a prize to be won. When Chloe stole him away, the betrayal felt like a personal failure I couldn't accept. In that timeline, my constant interference and desperate attempts to win him back had only pushed them closer together, forging their bond in the fire of my jealousy. This time, however, my deliberate absence seemed to have changed the dynamic. Ethan was still sneaking around with Chloe, but the thrill of the illicit affair was still fresh. Their love hadn't yet been solidified by my opposition. Playing along with his charade would undoubtedly twist the knife for Chloe, but the thought of pretending to love him, even for a moment, was utterly repulsive. I needed a way to break off this engagement, and I needed to do it quickly. An idea began to form in my mind. I looked at Ethan, forcing my expression to soften into one of loving affection. We're going to get married eventually anyway, right? Why don't we just do it now? Married? The word was a choked cry from Chloe, who was the first to react. What's wrong, cousin? Don't you like the idea? I asked, turning to her. Or is it that you were hoping to take my place and marry Ethan yourself? The directness of the accusation left her trembling and speechless. Ethan looked uncomfortable as well. It was clear he hadn't finished enjoying the thrill of having both of us dangle on his string. I decided to add more pressure. Ethan, I got into Harvard. If your mother found out, she'd be absolutely ecstatic. You really got into Harvard? Ethan's eyes lit up with genuine excitement. When I nodded, his face split into a wide grin. Wait right here. I have to go tell my mom the news right now. The Davenport family had built their fortune on coal mining decades ago. Even though that industry was no longer what it once was, they were still incredibly wealthy from a series of shrewd investments. They had money, but they lacked academic prestige. The most educated member of their family was Ethan himself, who was 3 years older than me and had gone straight into the workforce after high school. This was a source of insecurity for them, and whispers often followed them at social events, labeling them as classless, new-money upstarts. The more you lack something, the more you flaunt what you have. Mrs. Davenport was notorious for bragging about my excellent grades to anyone who would listen. The news that I was heading to Harvard would make her more desperate than ever to have me marry into their family as soon as possible. The moment Ethan was out the door, Chloe could no longer contain herself. She clutched her stomach, sank to her knees before me, and sobbed. Amelia, I'm so sorry. I'm pregnant with Ethan's baby. I know, I said calmly. After all, I was the one who poked holes in their condoms with a needle. My flat, emotionless words made her crying stop abruptly. How could you know? She stammered. I just offered a small, knowing smirk, said nothing more, and went back upstairs to my room. It was clear there was going to be a major confrontation later that afternoon. I needed to rest and conserve my energy. A few hours later, I was woken by a furious pounding on my door. Bang, bang, bang! Then came my father's irritated voice from the hallway. Locking your door in your own house? All you ever do is study and sleep. I might as well be raising a pig. Why can't you be more like your cousin? She's up early every day, cooking and cleaning. Frowning, I got out of bed and opened the door. When he saw my blank, expressionless face, his tirade trailed off. A flush of anger rose in his cheeks. You brat, how dare you look at me like that? He shouted, raising his hand to strike me. I moved quickly, slipping past him and heading downstairs, his hand swinging through empty air. Down in the living room, Mr. and Mrs. Davenport and Ethan were all laughing and talking happily. Their smiles grew even wider when they saw me. Standing off to the side, pouring tea with tear-filled eyes, was Chloe. It seemed the Davenports were still blissfully unaware of her pregnancy. I had thought Chloe was more capable than this. It looked like I would have to be the one to burst this happy little bubble. "Mr. Davenport, Mrs. Davenport," I said, walking directly up to Ethan's mother. Mrs. Davenport's eyes immediately locked onto the Harvard acceptance letter I was holding. She took it from my hand, examining it from every angle before passing it to her husband. Then she grabbed my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "Our Amelia is just so brilliant. I absolutely adore you." When my father came downstairs, she turned to him eagerly. "Our families will be joined soon enough. Ethan is already in his 20s, and Amelia is a legal adult. Why don't we just have the wedding first, and they can get the official license later? What do you think?" The Davenport family was more powerful and influential than ours. Hearing Mrs. Davenport's enthusiastic proposal, my father temporarily set aside his annoyance with me and managed a strained smile. "Of course, that sounds wonderful. So when should we set the date?" Watching the three of them begin to plan my wedding to Ethan, I found the entire situation utterly absurd. My mother was still at her office, and they were making these life-altering decisions with a blatant disregard for her. I glanced over at Chloe. Her eyes were fixed on Ethan, a desperate plea in her gaze. But Ethan, who normally would have melted under her look, was now sitting perfectly straight, completely ignoring her silent signals. When it came to money and status, their supposed love didn't seem to count for much. "How about next month? We can have the wedding before Amelia starts school," Mr. Davenport suggested. "I think that works," my father agreed. As the three of them sealed the deal, I finally spoke up. "Mr. and Mrs. Davenport, I want to marry Ethan too, but—" I cast a wounded, accusing look at Chloe and continued in a heartbroken voice. "But she seduced Ethan behind my back and is now carrying his child." My words fell like a bomb into the cheerful atmosphere, shocking everyone into silence. "Amelia, are you sure you're not mistaken? She's your cousin," Mrs. Davenport said, her voice laced with disbelief. "I wish I were mistaken, but she told me herself not long ago." The eye drops I'd discreetly put in earlier finally began to work their magic. A single perfect tear rolled down my cheek. Plop. I lowered my head, feigning heartbroken sobs, but I watched Chloe out of the corner of my eye. Of the three Thorne brothers, only my father had gone to college and married my mother. He had used my mother's family connections to start the Thorne Corporation, but she was the one who held the real power. He was just a president in name only. As for my father's two brothers and their families, although he secretly funneled money to them and made their lives far more comfortable than they would have been otherwise, they were still worlds apart from us. Chloe had envied my life since we were children. Now that I had laid everything out in the open, if she didn't seize this opportunity to marry into a wealthy family, I would lose all respect for her cunning. Fortunately, she didn't disappoint me. With every eye in the room on her, Chloe dropped to her knees in front of Mr. and Mrs. Davenport. "Mr. and Mrs. Davenport, Ethan and I are truly in love." Before they could even process her words, Ethan shot up from his seat. "I used protection. How could you be pregnant?" With that one panicked sentence, he confirmed everything. "Ethan, I don't know how this happened either," Chloe sobbed. "Didn't you say you didn't even like Amelia? That she was boring and dull, and that you'd break off the engagement to be with me? You also said—" "Shut your mouth!" An enraged Ethan slapped Chloe hard across the face. The next second, Mr. Davenport kicked his son squarely in the stomach. "You bastard! You've brought shame on the entire Davenport family." "Why are you hitting our son?" Mrs. Davenport protested, rushing to Ethan's side. "It's obvious this slut Chloe seduced him. If you're going to hit anyone, hit her." With a scream of fury, Mrs. Davenport grabbed a handful of Chloe's hair. My father rushed forward to intervene, but the furious Mrs. Davenport started scratching at him too. Afraid of getting his face marred, my father quickly stepped back, leaving Chloe to be beaten on the floor. Unable to escape, Chloe suddenly clutched her stomach and cried out, "The baby! My baby!" A streak of crimson flowed from between her legs, staining the pristine white carpet. Terrified of being implicated in a potential death, Mrs. Davenport immediately let go and frantically called for an ambulance. Half an hour later, Chloe was carried out on a stretcher. Mr. and Mrs. Davenport, Ethan, and my father followed anxiously behind. I sat alone on the living room sofa, watching them leave with a cold smirk on my lips. Just then, a dark glare shot in my direction. It was my father. He had turned around just as they were leaving and had caught the expression on my face. I instinctively wiped the smile away, but then I remembered. I wasn't the weak, powerless girl he could push around anymore. I lifted my head and gave him a defiant, challenging grin. Seeing me stand up to him for the first time, my father's anger flared, and for a moment, it looked like he was going to come back and deal with me. But the ambulance outside couldn't wait. He had no choice but to get in and leave. Not long after they were gone, my mother came home. She was dressed in a tailored business suit, her hair pulled back in a neat bun. At over 40, she had fine lines around her eyes, but she still carried an air of undeniable charm. Her hair was slightly disheveled, a clear sign she had rushed back. "Amelia, your aunt called me and said something happened. What's going on?" She was always busy with her career, and her tone could be a bit brisk, but her eyes were full of genuine concern. It was a concern that, in my past life, I had been too blind to see. Back then, it had never occurred to me that my mother worked so tirelessly for my sake. I had only seen her as someone who cared more about her job and making money than about me. I was a rebellious child and took pleasure in defying her. When she finally gave up the Thorn Corporation and divorced my father, with her only condition being that she take me with her, I had stubbornly chosen to stay with him, unable to bear the thought of losing to Chloe. In the end, a deeply disappointed mom gave up everything, left with nothing, and moved abroad. Thinking about it now made my nose sting with unshed tears. "Mom," I said, throwing myself into her arms and hugging her tightly. "Mom, you're finally back." In my past life, we had never been close. Since my rebirth, our relationship had improved, but there was still a certain distance between us compared to a typical mother and daughter. My mother's body stiffened in surprise at first, but then she relaxed, patting my back awkwardly. "Amelia, were you wronged?" "Yeah," I nodded, and then I told her everything that had happened that day, about Ethan and Chloe's secret affair and the baby. "That's outrageous," my mom fumed. "I'm going to go settle the score with them. The Davenport family and my brother's family had better give me a satisfactory explanation today." With that, my mom grabbed my hand and pulled me out the door, driving us straight to the hospital. When we arrived, Chloe was lying weakly in a hospital bed. Mr. and Mrs. Davenport, Ethan, and my father were all in the room. The Davenports looked grim, but my father was fussing over Chloe. "Chloe, does it hurt anywhere? Are you hungry? If you feel uncomfortable at all, just tell your uncle." "My baby," Chloe cried, her hand resting on her stomach. My father's voice became even gentler. "The baby's fine. You just need to rest and get better. Don't worry about anything else." "Thank you, Uncle." "Ha!" My mother, unable to listen to another second of it, pushed open the door and scoffed. "You're never this attentive with Amelia. Anyone who didn't know better would think Chloe was your illegitimate daughter, not your niece." My mom was the perfect spokesperson for my inner thoughts, saying everything I wanted to say. Unsurprisingly, my father's temper flared. A failure in his career, he always tried to assert his dominance over my mother through anger. "Rose, what nonsense are you talking about?" I'd seen this side of my father countless times, but this time I caught a flicker of something I'd never noticed before on his face. Guilt. I looked from my father to Chloe on the bed, and a wild, unsettling idea began to form in my mind. Nonsense! Chloe was shameless enough to steal Amelia's fiancé, and you're still defending her? Do you even care about your own daughter and me? My mother shot back. Chloe is just young and naive. Besides, she's not a stranger. She's my niece. Seeing that a full-blown argument was about to erupt, I quickly grabbed my mother's hand. "Mom." She took a deep breath, momentarily suppressing her anger at my father, and turned her attention to Mr. and Mrs. Davenport. The two of them, who had been watching the family drama unfold, immediately tensed up. "Rose, about that, don't call me that," my mother said coldly. "Since your son doesn't know how to behave himself, let's just call off this marriage." Before Mr. and Mrs. Davenport could respond, my father rushed forward. "What a waste to call it off. Why don't we just let Chloe marry Ethan in Amelia's place?" "Absolutely not." Mrs. Davenport's eyes widened in horror. "Amelia got into Harvard. And Chloe? She goes to some no-name college and comes from the countryside. The Davenport family would never accept a daughter-in-law like that. In my opinion, Chloe should just get an abortion, go back to where she came from, and we'll pretend none of this ever happened. We can't let one little slut ruin the harmony between our two families, right, Rose?" Mrs. Davenport looked to my mother for support. My mother glanced at my father's livid face. She patted my hand reassuringly, then said casually, "I suppose that could work." Seeing my mother concede, Mrs. Davenport let out a huge sigh of relief. "In that case, I'll have the doctor prepare for the abortion procedure right away," she said, about to make the arrangements. Chloe, who had been lying in bed looking too weak to speak, suddenly jumped up, ran over, and hugged Ethan's leg. "Ethan, how can you do this to me?" she sobbed, a river of tears streaming down her face. Ethan's expression showed a flicker of conflict. Seeing this, Mrs. Davenport was furious. "You little tramp, get your hands off my son!" she yelled, trying to pull Chloe away. Just then, two figures burst into the room. "You dare bully my daughter? I'll fight you to the death." It was Chloe's parents. They had clearly just heard the news and had rushed over. Seeing their daughter being manhandled, they shoved Mrs. Davenport aside and started hitting her. Mr. Davenport jumped into the fray to defend his wife. Chloe's parents were used to farm work and were surprisingly strong. Mr. and Mrs. Davenport were no match for them. Seeing his parents getting beaten and screaming for help, Ethan jumped in too. The six of them ended up in a tangled, chaotic mess on the floor. I couldn't help it. A laugh escaped my lips. My laughter caught my father's attention. He strode towards me, his face contorted with fury. "Amelia, you've gone too far. If it weren't for you, things would never have gotten to this point." "Me? What does this have to do with me? Isn't Chloe the one who is shameless?" "You shut up." "I won't. What, is it true what Mom said? Is Chloe your illegitimate daughter and not your niece?" At my words, my father's face turned a shade of purple. "Nonsense. I'm going to teach you a lesson today," he roared, raising his hand towards me. My mother instinctively moved to shield me. "You dare." "Why wouldn't I dare?" "Rose, if you try to stop me, I'll hit you too." "Ha!" A cold, mocking young voice came from the doorway of the hospital room. This is hilarious. I've never seen a father who can't stand to see his own daughter succeed. I turned and saw a face that was both strange and familiar. The young man had delicate, well-defined features and was incredibly handsome. A fresh scrape on his cheek and a bit of dried blood at the corner of his mouth didn't detract from his good looks. In fact, they added a touch of wild, rebellious charm. But his eyes held a clear hostility, giving him a fierce air. It was my high school classmate, Liam. After graduation, I had lost touch with most of my classmates. The reason he seemed familiar was that I had seen him once just before I was reborn. I was walking home from my factory job when two men blocked my path. Liam had pulled up in a luxury car, honked the horn once, and the two men had run off, clearly intimidated. I had thanked him, and he had simply said, "No need to thank me, old classmate." Only then did I dredge up the few fragmented memories I had of him. I was grateful but also deeply embarrassed by the contrast between our lives. Snapping back to the present, I looked at his face again. He wasn't as composed as he had been in that memory. He seemed younger, more boyish, but still just as handsome. "Who do you think you are?" my father snarled at him. "This is my family's business. It's not for some little punk like you to butt in. Today, I'm going to discipline my own daughter." Humiliated by an outsider's mockery, my father's pride stung even more. He rolled up his sleeves, ready to hit me. My mom shielded me, but his hand didn't stop. He was actually going to hit my mother, too. I moved to block his hand, but another hand shot out before mine, gripping my father's arm in a vice-like hold. It was Liam. My furious father tried to teach Liam a lesson too, but with his arm held fast, he couldn't move an inch. As they faced off, Liam looked completely relaxed, while my father's face turned the color of a beet. Finally, hospital staff noticed the commotion and rushed into the room to break it up. My father took the opportunity to pull his hand back and immediately went to check on Chloe. I turned to thank Liam, but he had already turned and walked away. At the end of the long, sterile hallway, his figure looked thin and solitary, surrounded by a lonely aura. Half an hour later, thanks to the hospital staff's intervention, everyone in the room had finally calmed down. But apart from my dad, who was feigning concern for Chloe while actually trying to stay out of the conflict, everyone else had scratched faces and disheveled, pathetic appearances. The Davenports held their chins high, arrogant and defiant. Chloe's parents, on the other hand, hung their heads, looking anxious. Their biggest dream was for Chloe to marry into a rich family, but they had just been rolling around on the floor, beating up that very same family. "The baby in Chloe's stomach must be aborted," Mr. Davenport declared angrily. Mrs. Davenport chimed in, "I would rather die than let Chloe marry into our family." "How can you say that?" Chloe's father protested. "Your son got our Chloe pregnant. If you don't take responsibility, we'll go to your company and cause a scene, let everyone judge who's right." His threat made Mr. and Mrs. Davenport's faces darken. Mr. Davenport took out his checkbook and wrote a figure. 20,000. That's a human life. You think you can buy a life for 20,000? Chloe's mother shrieked. 50,000, Mr. Davenport said, cutting her off. This time, as soon as the words left his mouth, Chloe's parents eagerly nodded. Deal. On the hospital bed, Chloe fainted. For real this time. Unfortunately, even fainting couldn't save her from the operating table. Having dealt with Chloe's family, an exhausted Mr. and Mrs. Davenport turned to my mom. "Rose, once the baby is gone, we can have Ethan and Amelia get married. What do you think?" My mom's eyes flickered. "That depends on how your son behaves." "Don't worry, if Ethan messes around again, I'll break his legs," Mrs. Davenport said, pulling him over. Ethan nodded his promise distractedly. His eyes kept darting in the direction Sarah had been wheeled away. Without another word, my mom took my hand and we left. In the car, my mom asked me while driving, "What do you think about the marriage with Ethan?" "I wouldn't touch that scumbag with a 10-foot pole," I said immediately. Just thinking about him made me feel sick. Cheating, cowardly, irresponsible. He didn't possess a single redeeming quality. I must have been completely blind in my past life to fight with Chloe over a piece of trash like him. My words seemed to lift a great weight from my mother's shoulders. "So what do you want to do now?" "I want to break off the engagement," I said. "Dragging things out with him would certainly cause him and Chloe more pain, but just the thought of being his fiancée makes me feel disgusted." "Mom, if Chloe has the abortion, won't the Davenport family just keep clinging to me?" I told her my worry. She smiled reassuringly. "Don't worry, leave it to me." When we got home, my mom first made a call to Mrs. Davenport. "Mrs. Davenport, has Chloe had the abortion yet?" "Not yet. The doctor said they have to wait for her to wake up and check her condition before operating. I think that little tramp is faking it." Mrs. Davenport's voice crackled over the phone. "Of course she is. What kind of decent person seduces her own cousin's fiancé? Don't get soft-hearted now. It's not like Ethan can't have other children. When he and Amelia get married, they can have 10 or more if they want." After ending the call, my mom looked at me. Before I could ask, she explained, "Ethan is an only child. His parents went through a lot of trouble to have him. I heard Mr. Davenport has fertility issues. So Mrs. Davenport might not let Chloe go through with the surgery because she wants an heir?" My eyes lit up with understanding. My mom smiled and tapped my forehead. "Smart girl, that way the Davenport family won't have the nerve to bother us anymore. And as for Chloe, even if she has the baby, the Davenports will never accept her as a daughter-in-law." Hearing her plan, I looked at my mom with newfound admiration. "Mom, you're amazing." My mom smiled and hugged me, stroking my hair. no one gets to bully my daughter. Feeling the warmth of her embrace, my nose started to sting. She had said those exact same words to me in my past life. And how had I responded? I had said, if you really don't want me to be bullied, you should get Ethan back for me. But Amelia, Ethan isn't worth it. Whether he's worth it or not, I just like him. I had been like someone possessed, my only desire to tear Chloe and Ethan apart. Unable to dissuade me, my mom had swallowed her pride and gone to Mr. and Mrs. Davenport, only to be looked down on by them. Of course, Ethan had treated me so badly, yet I had still refused to let go. With a daughter like me, it was no wonder people looked down on my mother. Amelia, what's wrong? Sensing my emotional turmoil, my mom asked with concern. I buried my face in her chest and mumbled, Mom, I don't think my dad deserves to be my father. Just as my mom and I hadn't been close, there had always been a barrier between her and my dad. She was always busy with work while he spent her money showing off everywhere. Thinking back now, their relationship had been broken for a long time. My mom had only stayed with him for my sake. But now, I saw things clearly. I didn't need a father who didn't care about me. I hoped my mom would ask for divorce, but she didn't. She just held me tightly, and after a long moment, let out a deep sigh. I was a little disappointed, but I understood. In my last life, my mom had only filed for divorce a year later, after I'd been driven to a complete mental breakdown by Ethan, Chloe, and my father. She had completely given up on him and wanted to take me away. But now, other than defending Chloe, my father hadn't done anything completely unforgivable yet. As much as I wanted to get rid of him, I knew some things couldn't be rushed. In the afternoon, my mom went out to start planning my college acceptance party. I called all the household staff together and gave a single order. Throw all of Chloe's things out. Yes, miss. I had put up with Chloe for a while for the sake of my studies. From now on, I wouldn't give anyone the chance to hurt me again. After all of her belongings were thrown onto the street, the staff deep cleaned my room and I moved back down from the attic. That evening, my dad came home right after my mom did. When he saw us, his usual arrogant demeanor was gone, replaced by a sheepish, placating look. He walked up to my mom and took her hand. At the hospital today, I was just so angry. Please don't be mad at me. Usually, even when my dad knew he was wrong, he would never apologize. He was definitely up to something. My mom pulled her hand away, her expression cool. From the look on your face, Chloe didn't have the abortion, did she? Caught, my dad looked a bit embarrassed. Ethan had a checkup. He has a low sperm count, so it might be difficult for him to have kids in the future. This was a last resort, then, my mom said, looking at him steadily. Facing my mom's composure, my dad's guilt quickly turned to anger. It's Amelia's own fault for not being likable enough for Ethan. Since Chloe is already pregnant with his child, it's better to just give the marriage to her. My mom had a temper too, and her face darkened instantly. Daniel, I don't care about this marriage, but what are you trying to say? What do you mean Amelia isn't likable? In your eyes, is your niece Chloe the only one who's likable? Isn't she? My dad slammed the table and stood up, pointing at me. Look at her, with that face like I owe her $1 million. How is that likable? Not like Chloe, who brings me tea, fusses over me, and... You shut up! My mom was so angry her chest was heaving. Afraid she would make herself sick, I quickly went to her side and rubbed her back. Mom, let's not be angry. It's fine if Dad doesn't love me. I still have you. Seeing my concern, my mom took a deep breath, trying to suppress her rage. Ignoring my dad, she took my hand and led me upstairs. Upstairs, she looked at me. Your father, She wanted to say something, but the words wouldn't come out. I squeezed her hand back. Mom, in my heart, I don't have a father. From the time I was little, he never cared about me, never took care of me, never came to my parent-teacher conferences. He was never a part of my life, big or small. In fact, he feels no love for me, only disgust. But he's different with Chloe. With her, he's like a real father. Sometimes I even think... Thinking of my suspicion, I gritted my teeth and continued. I think Chloe is his real daughter, and I'm just a stumbling block who stole her place. Amelia! My mom gasped, shocked by my words. I can promise you, you are your father's child. As for Chloe, your dad is selfish. He's always wanted to leech off me to support his two brothers. In his mind, he and his brothers are the real family and I'm an outsider. He puts you in the same category as me, which is why he's like that with you. Chloe is definitely not your father's child, don't worry. If he doesn't love you, Mom will love you twice as much. I nodded, not dwelling on the issue anymore, and changed the subject. Dad wants Chloe to marry Ethan. Did Mr. and Mrs. Davenport accept her because she's pregnant? If that was the case, it would be letting Chloe off far too easily. Of course not. I know Mr. and Mrs. Davenport too well. They're probably planning to have Chloe secretly give birth to the child and then have you and Ethan raise it. They sent your father back to persuade us. But your father would never let his precious niece suffer that kind of injustice. So he came back hoping I would step in and convince the Davenports to let Chloe marry into their family. I'm not that stupid. After that fight with your father just now, he probably won't be able to bring it up again. After listening to my mom, I couldn't help but give her a thumbs up. My mom is the best. Of course, my mom said with a proud look. Your acceptance party is in 3 days. I'll text you the hotel address later. For the next few days, just focus on inviting your friends to the party. Leave everything else to me. At the party, I'll announce the cancellation of your engagement to Ethan. Okay, Mom. Back in my room, I was still a little puzzled. My mom was smarter than I had ever given her credit for. She was so sure that Chloe wasn't my dad's daughter. Could it be that I was really wrong about this? I shook my head, pushing the thought aside for now. I took out my phone and sent invitations to a few close friends for my acceptance party. At the very end, I thought of Liam. He was in my class, but I barely had any memories of him from high school. I remembered he always sat in the back row, either sleeping or playing on his phone during class. The teachers didn't bother with him. He was always getting into fights and having his parents called to the school. He was the classic rebel student, but because he was so handsome, his desk was always stuffed with love letters. He never touched them, just threw them in the trash periodically. We had barely interacted, yet he had helped me twice in this life and the last. After a moment of hesitation, I sent Liam a message. Since I didn't know him well, my tone was quite polite. My acceptance party is in 3 days. Are you free? To my surprise, he replied quickly with a single word. Okay. My close friends, whether they did well on their exams or not, were all having their acceptance parties around this time. Today I got ready to go out. As I did, my dad, who was sitting on the sofa, looked me up and down, his eyes sharp. Amelia, is there something you need? My voice was cold. Frowning with displeasure, my dad said, Your cousin is still in the hospital recovering. How can you have the heart to go out and have fun? By that logic, your niece is still lying in a hospital bed. How can you have the heart to sit at home drinking tea? I think you should be at the hospital watching over her day and night. My blunt retort made my dad's face darken. I was up all night last night. I couldn't stay awake today. Oh. In a hurry to leave, I couldn't be bothered to waste any more time on him. As I reached the door, my dad's voice followed me again. Remember to find time to visit your cousin? He probably didn't want me to visit Chloe so much as he wanted Chloe to have a chance to work on me. Ignoring him completely, I walked out the door. After attending my friend's party, on the way back, I had the driver take a detour to the hospital. When I arrived, Chloe was sitting up in bed, eating fruit that her parents were feeding her. Our Chloe is so clever. Looks like you'll be marrying into a rich family soon. What's the use of that Amelia being good at school? She can't even keep a man. When you marry Ethan, have your uncle give you a big dowry. The 3 of them were counting their chickens before they hatched. I chose that moment to push the door open and walk in. But Mrs. Davenport just called me. She said there's absolutely no way Ethan will marry Chloe. After Chloe has the baby, she's supposed to pack her bags and go back to the countryside. My words made the faces of everyone in the room change dramatically. Amelia, it's already come to this. Even if you marry Ethan, you'll only have his body, not his heart. At this point, Chloe's mother's triumphant expression vanished, replaced by a look of sorrow. Amelia, you've had a good life since you were a child. You've never lacked anything. Chloe is different. Can't you just not fight with her over Ethan? As Chloe's mother spoke, Chloe was already in tears. Amelia, for my sake, since I'm your older sister, can you please let me go? Chloe's father, however, remained defiant. Amelia, even if you don't agree to cancel the engagement, your father will find a way to make Chloe marry Ethan. If you don't let go now, you'll be the one who loses face in the end. This family of three was putting on a show, using both soft and hard tactics. If this were the weak, kind-hearted me from my past life, I probably would have thought it was all my fault. But what do you mean, let you go? The one who shamelessly seduced my fiancé and got pregnant with his child was Chloe. I must have had some seriously bad luck to get tangled up with people like you. I'm telling you, Chloe, no matter what tricks you have up your sleeve, I will not break off the engagement with Ethan. Go ahead and have the baby. When it's born, it will call me mom, and you will always be hidden away. At best, the baby might call you auntie. Hearing this, everyone in the room was stunned into silence. Crash! The cafeteria lady, who had just walked in with a tray of food, accidentally dropped a bowl. I'm so sorry, I'm so clumsy, she said, frantically trying to pick up the broken ceramic pieces. She ended up cutting her hand. Unable to just watch, I stepped forward. Let me. I knelt and helped her pick up the broken pieces. After I finished, I stood up to throw them in the trash. As I looked up, my eyes unintentionally fell on the cafeteria lady's face, and I couldn't look away. She looked so much like Chloe. The suspicion that I had pushed down resurfaced with a vengeance. Noticing me staring at her face, the cafeteria lady quickly lowered her head and said, "Thank you." "It's nothing." I patted her shoulder reassuringly and, in the process, plucked a single stray hair from her head. Just as I stepped out of the hospital room, I saw Ethan. He looked incredibly excited. "Amelia, this is great. You don't mind that Chloe is having my baby and you're willing to be the child's mother?" "Don't worry, I'll be good to you from now on," he said, his eyes full of what he probably thought was deep affection. It seemed he had overheard what I said in the room. I was about to puke. How blind was I in my past life to be upset that Chloe stole this piece of work from me? What about Chloe? I deliberately raised my voice. "Once she has the baby, we'll just give her some money," Ethan said dismissively. Inside the room, his words caused another uproar. Chloe fainted again. Whether it was real or fake this time, I didn't care. I looked at Ethan with a blank expression. What I said just now was just to spite Chloe. The moment you hooked up with her, we were done. Please tell your parents that when you get back so they stop telling everyone that I'm their future daughter-in-law. Being associated with people like you is pretty embarrassing. After saying my piece, I ignored Ethan's shocked reaction and walked away. The day before my acceptance party, my mom and I came home after picking out my dress. We found Chloe and her parents in our house. The three of them were lounging on the sofa, cracking sunflower seeds and watching TV. The villa was a mess, with shells and spilled tea all over the floor. "What are you doing here?" I asked, looking at them in disgust. Chloe's father leaned back further into the sofa. "Amelia, what kind of question is that? We're family. Chloe just got out of the hospital and she can't be inconvenienced. Where else would she stay?" At that moment, a maid came downstairs carrying boxes. I looked closer and saw they were my things from my room. Noticing my stare, Chloe said with an innocent look, "Amelia, your dad said I need a good environment to recover, so please, you'll have to stay in the attic or a guest room." Unbelievable. They had taken over my room again without even telling me. I was furious. Just as I was about to speak, my mom beat me to it. "Security, throw these three out." "You dare. Do you know who I am? I'm the older brother of the man of this house. If you lay a hand on me, I'll have you all fired," Chloe's father blustered. But the security guards completely ignored his threats. After all, this villa was a wedding gift to my mom from my grandparents. The three of them were unceremoniously thrown out and sat on the curb in front of our house, cursing loudly. I said calmly, "Keep yelling and I'll call the police." I took out my phone. As I dialed 911, the three of them instantly fell silent. They scrambled up from the ground, grabbed their few belongings, and started to leave. "Chloe," I called out to her. "What do you want now?" she snapped, unable to pretend anymore. She clutched her stomach, her eyes full of defensiveness and hatred. "Don't you dare touch my baby." "Ha!" I scoffed. "A baby alone won't get you into the Davenport family. The Davenports care most about their reputation. The only way they might let you in the front door is if you make a huge public scene about being pregnant with Ethan's child so everyone knows." "Why are you being so nice?" Chloe looked touched, but she wasn't a complete idiot. A moment later, she figured it out. "Amelia, you're doing this on purpose. You want the Davenport family to be disgraced too." "Yes, I am. I've given you the opportunity. Take it or leave it." Not long after Chloe's family left, my dad came home. In the living room, he and my mom had an unprecedented argument about me and about Chloe. The argument started with Chloe seducing Ethan and spiraled out into much deeper issues. My dad felt that for years, my mom had looked down on him because she was the breadwinner, which made him feel emasculated. My mom, on the other hand, aside from feeling hurt for me, was most wounded by my dad's years of emotional neglect. My usually elegant and composed mother finally broke down. "Daniel, you are a coward. You are useless. You are a chauvinist. You don't protect your own wife and child. You are heartless and blind. Rose, you're asking for it." My dad raised his hand to hit my mom. Of course, his hand never landed. It was caught midair by a security guard. "Beat him up," my mom said, her voice cold and devoid of emotion. "The harder you hit him, the bigger the bonus." For the next few minutes, the living room was filled with Daniel's screams. I had wanted to do this for a long time. In my past life, even though I had ended up at a community college, I could have made a decent life for myself through hard work, but it was Daniel, Chloe, and Ethan. No matter what job I found, they would use their power to get me fired. My miserable past life was partly my own fault for being so blind, but from start to finish, I had never done anything truly wrong. It was these evil people who kept pushing me down. From the moment I was reborn, I had wanted to beat Daniel to a pulp. But now that it was actually happening, I didn't feel the satisfaction I expected. Because of my mom. Her face was filled with a deep, heart-wrenching pain. "Mom," I said, going to her and gently taking her hand. "I'm fine, sweetie." My mom managed a weak smile. When Daniel was beaten so badly he couldn't make a sound, my mom told the guards, "Stop." I was still unwilling to let him off so easily, but my mom patted my hand reassuringly. "Your party is tomorrow. It wouldn't be good if things got out of hand." So I didn't say anything more. Daniel was taken to the hospital and my mom hired someone to stand guard at his door. That night, the light in my mom's room stayed on. Worried, I went to her door and saw her inside, gathering all the photos of her and my dad. She looked at them for a moment, reminiscing, and then viciously tore them to shreds. That's right. I had only seen how terrible my dad was, but I had never seen everything my mom and dad had been through together. Sensing my presence, my mom beckoned me over. I went and nestled into her arms. My mom's voice came from above me. "When I wanted to marry your father, your grandparents were against it. They said he came from a poor background and wasn't very capable. But I was fooled by his sweet talk and was determined to marry him. Now it seems I really made the wrong choice." Mom, everyone makes wrong choices in life. The important thing is to realize your mistake in time. Besides, I looked up at her. If you hadn't been with Dad, maybe you wouldn't have had such a smart and wonderful daughter like me. My playful words brought a smile to my mom's face. She looked at me and asked seriously, "Amelia, if your dad and I get a divorce, would you be okay with that?" "Yes." "And would you choose to stay with me?" "Yes." This time, I answered without a shred of hesitation. My answer seemed to give my mom strength, and her face regained its confidence. "After your party tomorrow, I'll file for divorce." "Okay." I hugged my mom and slept in her bed with her. Only after her breathing became steady did I get up. I found one of my dad's short hairs on the pillow and left the bedroom with it. The next morning, I made an excuse to go out, went to the hospital to get a sample of Chloe's hair, and then I submitted 2 sets for DNA testing. One for Chloe and my dad, and one for Chloe and the cafeteria lady. When I got home, my mom and I left for the hotel together. As noon approached, guests began to arrive. My dad, who was supposed to be recovering in the hospital, insisted on getting up and coming to my party. I was a little worried he would cause a scene, but my mom assured me he was too vain for that, which put me at ease. Just as my mom predicted, my dad, who usually wouldn't even give me a second glance, was now all smiles. The grin was so wide that even the bandages on his face couldn't hide it. "Old Thorn, your daughter has really made you proud." "Of course, she takes after me." Someone noticed his battered appearance and asked with concern, "What happened to you? How did you get so injured?" A shadow passed through his eyes, but the smile on my dad's face remained bright. Well, I was so happy my daughter got into Harvard that I had a little too much to drink and took a tumble. Hearing this, my mom and I exchanged a look, both trying to suppress a giggle. I had to admit, he was good at making up excuses. His talent for lying through his teeth really came in handy. Wave after wave of guests arrived. Finally, to my mom's relief, my grandparents showed up. They had been angry with my mom for stubbornly marrying my dad. Over the years, although they secretly helped her with her career, they had almost no contact with her openly. Every time my mom went to see them, they would give her the cold shoulder. Only when I was around would the two old folks cheer up. But I knew they were just using me as an excuse to care for my mom. Their love for me was an extension of their love for her. "Dad, Mom, you're finally here," my mom said with a sigh of relief. My grandparents put on a proud face. If we weren't worried about spoiling Amelia's party, we wouldn't have come. Yes, of course, let me show you in." My mom went to help my grandparents. My classmates had all arrived, as had the Davenport family and even Chloe's family. As noon approached and the guests had nearly all arrived, I still hadn't seen Liam. It was only then that I felt I might have been too forward. I didn't know what his grades were like or which university he got into. Inviting him like this? Just as I was thinking, a familiar voice came from above my head. "Excuse me, where do I sit?" I looked up and met Liam's handsome eyes. "I'll take you," I said, a smile blooming on my face without me even realizing it. I led Liam to the table where my high school classmates were sitting. When they saw him, a few girls who had been chatting excitedly suddenly blushed and fell silent. "Amelia, you're amazing. You even managed to invite the school heartthrob who never gets close to anyone." I just smiled and didn't say anything in response. The Thorne Corporation was a big company, and most of the guests at my party were business partners. I followed my parents around, toasting the guests. When we got to the Davenport family's table, someone asked, "Why are your in-laws sitting with us?" My mom smiled and said, "Actually, Amelia and Ethan have called off their engagement. It was just a joke from many years ago, not to be taken seriously." Everyone here was sharp. No one pushed the issue. It was Mr. and Mrs. Davenport who looked unhappy, but they held back and said nothing. My mom wanted to spare the Davenports some dignity, but I didn't. How could they do something so undignified and expect to walk away with their pride intact? The world doesn't work that way. I looked at Chloe. She was clutching her stomach, looking conflicted, as if debating whether to reveal her pregnancy with Ethan's child right then and there. Fine. I started walking towards Ethan, who was standing not far from her. Halfway there, my foot suddenly twisted, and I stumbled forward. Right in front of me was Chloe. Just as I was about to fall on top of her, a strong arm wrapped around my waist. It was Liam. He had caught me. "Thanks," I said, steadying myself in his arms. Chloe, her nerves shot, completely lost it. She jumped up from her chair, clutching her stomach and pointing at me. "Amelia, you did that on purpose. You can't stand that I'm carrying Ethan's child, and you wanted to get rid of my baby." Her outburst caused an uproar. Everyone in the room instantly understood. So, the reason I broke up with Ethan was that he had hooked up with my cousin, and they even had a child together. The people here were all concerned with appearances, and many of them looked at the Davenport family with open disdain. Mr. and Mrs. Davenport cared most about their reputation. Mrs. Davenport immediately denied it. Chloe, what nonsense are you talking about? Our Ethan is not someone you can just hook up with whenever you want. At this point, Chloe had nothing to lose. Mrs. Davenport, you know perfectly well whether the baby in my belly is Ethan's or not. If you really won't admit it, we can just do a DNA test after the baby is born. You slut! I'll tear your mouth apart! Seeing that the Davenports and Chloe's family were about to start fighting again, my mom had security throw both families out. The room fell silent once more. Everyone looked at me with sympathy. Everyone except my dad, of course. His face was ashen and he looked at me as if he wanted to eat me alive. As soon as we got home after the party, my dad exploded. How can you two be so vicious? Chloe is already miserable enough, pregnant with Ethan's child and not accepted by his family. Do you have to push her to her death? But isn't this what she deserves? Amelia, don't think I won't teach you a lesson. My dad strode towards me. The security guards stood in front of me, forming a protective circle. If you don't want to end up back in the hospital, go ahead and try. I knew you were no good. Enough! My mom, unable to take it anymore, cut my dad off. Daniel, let's get a divorce. A divorce? Rose, are you kidding me? My dad's voice was filled with shock and contempt. Clearly, in his mind, no matter how he treated my mom and me, she would never leave him. Yes, a divorce, my mom said, her voice firm. After a moment to process this, my dad sneered. Fine by me. We split the assets 50-50. Why should you get half? What have you ever contributed to this family besides eating, drinking, and playing around? I protested. But my mom said, fine, I'll have the lawyer draft the papers later. Then it settled. After my dad went upstairs, my mom looked at me reassuringly. Amelia, since we've decided on a divorce, it's best to make it a clean break. Money is something Mom can earn again. Besides, he is your father after all. It's fine to give him some money. My mom had a point, so I didn't say anything. Seeing that my mom was okay, I told her I was going out to see a friend. In reality, I went to the hospital. I hoped my suspicion was wrong. If it was, I could let Daniel have some of the assets to spare my mom more pain. At the hospital, I easily got the test results. When I opened the report and saw the results, I was so angry I could barely breathe. I was right. Chloe was Daniel's daughter with that cafeteria lady. I immediately took the results home to show my mom. My mom, who had been grieving the end of her decades-long marriage, was consumed by rage when she found out my dad had cheated on her and had a child who was 3 years older than me. But that's my mom for you. Even in her anger, she didn't lose her head. She called my grandparents and told them everything. My grandparents came over with my 3 uncles. My dad, who was taking a nap, was dragged out of bed by my uncles and beaten mercilessly. Already injured, he was left barely conscious. Then, my eldest uncle placed a divorce agreement in front of him and told him to sign. When my dad saw that it stipulated he would leave with nothing, he refused. My uncle sneered. Daniel, you better think carefully. If you don't sign, I'll sue you for bigamy tomorrow and have you thrown in jail. Not only that, but from now on, I'll beat up your other family members every time I see them. None of you will ever get ahead in life. Finally realizing that his affair with Chloe was exposed, my dad's face turned ashen and he signed his name. At that moment, my parents were officially divorced. From now on, he was no longer my father. Daniel was thrown out of the villa like a piece of trash. I'm so mad. If it weren't for Amelia, I would have made sure he went to prison. My uncles fumed. My mom pushed aside her own grief to comfort my grandparents and uncles. In the end, my grandparents and uncles, feeling sorry for my mom and me, insisted on having us stay with them for a while. At my grandparents' house, I felt a warmth I had never experienced before. It was so warm that I never wanted to go back. My mom also felt the villa was tainted with bad luck and sold it at a price well below market value. There was still over a month until the start of the semester at Harvard. My mom asked me, "What are your plans for now?" "Mom, I want to do an internship at the company." Now that the trash was taken out, it was time to make money. I needed to learn how to run the company so I could inherit the family business. Hearing my answer, my mom smiled. Good. That was my plan too. My mom took me shopping for a few business suits. Dressed in a suit with my long hair tied back, I looked in the mirror at a confident, assertive young woman, a far cry from the weak person I was in my past life. The next day, I went to the company with my mom. I watched as my mom gave orders to the HR department to fire everyone Daniel had hired. Soon, the phone in the CEO's office was ringing off the hook. Rose, we're family after all. What that bastard Daniel did has nothing to do with me. Sister-in-law, I've already cut ties with Daniel. Jobs are hard to find these days. Can't you, for old time's sake, not fire me? Faced with losing their income, the brotherly love Daniel was so proud of proved to be utterly worthless. Unwilling to waste any more time, my mom blocked all of them. She assigned me to a senior employee, and I had a lot to learn every day. Amidst this busy schedule, news of the Davenport family and Chloe's family reached my ears piece by piece. It wasn't that I wanted to hear it, but the Davenports' recent scandals were so numerous that they became the talk of the town. After Chloe publicly announced her pregnancy at my party, Mr. and Mrs. Davenport, feeling utterly humiliated, forbade Ethan from ever seeing her again. But whether it was because Ethan was deeply in love or Chloe was just that manipulative, he started sneaking around with her behind his parents' backs. When Mrs. Davenport accidentally found out, she was so angry she had to be hospitalized. At the Davenport Corporation, their scandalous behavior caused several major partnership deals to fall through, resulting in massive losses. Watching the company's stock price fall day after day, Mr. Davenport was at his wits' end. And that wasn't all. It turned out Chloe had no idea she was an illegitimate child. When she found out the cafeteria lady was her real mother, she cursed both Daniel and her mom for being shameless. In a fit of rage, the stress caused her to lose the baby. Without the baby, Chloe's chances of marrying into the Davenport family were gone. Her status in her own family plummeted. She dropped the arrogant act and started trying to win Daniel over again. After all, Daniel had money. The reason Daniel had signed the divorce papers so readily was partly because he was afraid of jail and my uncle's, and partly because he had a substantial amount of his own secret savings. But having grown accustomed to a life of luxury, he couldn't stand watching his savings dwindle. Lured in by his brother, he got hooked on gambling. In just 1 month, he lost millions. Without money to his name, Daniel could no longer command the flattery of his family and was kicked out of their house. A former neighbor mentioned that a disheveled and destitute Daniel had come looking for my mom and me at the villa, but of course the house had long since been sold and he couldn't find us. Listening to others gossip about the miserable state of those people now, I found that my heart was surprisingly calm. We were worlds apart now. Whether they lived well or poorly in the future, I would strive to become better and better. On the first day of school at Harvard, Ethan blocked my path at the campus gate. Amelia, I'm completely done with Chloe. We grew up together. We were childhood sweethearts. Can you please forgive me this one time? The funny thing was, I could actually see a hint of genuine affection in his eyes. Some people are like that. They don't cherish what they have, but they long for what they can't get. Sorry, no. Looking at him for another second felt like a waste of my life. I walked right past him and onto the campus. A familiar figure came into view. It was Liam. He was also holding an acceptance letter. It was like he was waiting for me. When he saw me, he walked over and asked, "Want to go register together?" "Okay," I nodded, and we walked side by side. Don't dwell on the past, don't fear the future. I will ultimately become the person I want to be.